we continue our Across Africa coverage on the burgeoning crisis on the continent. Joining us now from Washington is Dr. Renee Sanders, who was the former U.S. ambassador to Nigeria and the Democratic Republic of Congo. And then here in our New York studios, we're joined by documentarian Kohn, who filmed a project in South Sudan just about a year ago. Welcome to both of you, and thank you so much for coming on Arise America. I do appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to start with you, Dr. Sanders. It seems this whole reason, there are pockets of violence and unrest all over the continent of Africa and the world, to be fair. However, this particular area in Central Africa seems to be bubbling over beyond a boiling point. What's your assessment on the unrest in the South Sudan and the surrounding countries, which would include CAR?
Yes, I think that in South Sudan, they had their election, sort of their independence, in 2011. So it's a very, very new country with a lot of challenges. I think that one of the things that was not addressed really in the independence accords was really the tensions within the ethnic groups there. You have, of course, the president being Dinka. You have the vice president, who is now one of the main rebel leaders that's been accused of the coup, who is a Nuer. And they've always had tensions between those ethnic groups. I think that the independence accords only really focused on the North-South dialogue and not the tensions that were already there between the two major ethnic groups that are in the South. And I think that what we see today is that boiling over. I served in Sudan years ago, and so I'm very, very familiar with those differences in the ethnic tensions there. And I think what we see playing out in South Sudan now, particularly this very new country, is those tensions that have always existed between the Dinka and the Nuer.
Let me ask you one other question that I've read a report about, and then I want to bring Matt into the conversation. And that as I read that perhaps the Sudan is behind some of this conflict in the South Sudan because of their unhappiness of South Sudan's emancipation from the country. Have you heard anything like that? Does that make any sense to you?
It's a very complex country. As I said, I lived there for 3 years, so I understand those issues. I would not eliminate anything from the complexity that's in Sudan right now. It's an oil-rich country, and so there are really a lot of tensions, not only politically, but economically. The only major pipeline for all of the oil coming out of Sudan is really controlled by the government. And so you have this dichotomy there of these two landlocked countries dependent on one single major resource, and really fighting over, how to move the country forward with different views. And then you also have the sectarian differences between the North and the South. So all of that together makes for a very, very delicate environment where these two countries, the very new South Sudan and the previous Sudan, really up against each other and really looking for ways to undercut each other too. So all of that is part and parcel of what are some of the challenges that we see playing out today.
Matt, thank you for sitting by so patiently. You've spent some time in this area, worked on a documentary about peace and reconciliation. Tell me, first of all, what you observed, acknowledging that it was more than a year ago, but what was your experience while you were there?
Yeah, I've been going to Sudan since 2007. And Chad, and what I found is that there's a lot of ethnic differences in areas, but mostly the problems are political. And the crisis right now is a political crisis. It has ethnic dimensions to it, but it has to do with the way the party is nominating politicians and the way they're interacting with each other. Until 2 weeks ago, everybody who's involved in this crisis was on the same team. Publicly on the same team, and they were, they had variations and differences, but you could go back to 2 weeks ago, there was a public press conference, and they were all laughing about it, and they had two different press conferences in the same building called the SPLM House. So there's a definite reality where there's people on the ground who are seeing the ethnic dimension and creating small atrocities on both sides, and there's also a lot of people who are saying, hey, I'm not going to be part of that. And if you look at social media, and you look at the conversations you have, if you know Sudanese people, which I've been doing now for a week and a half to find out how they're dealing with this crisis, they don't want this to happen. They know what the 1991 split was like and what it did, and the classic image of the vulture with the baby, skeleton babies,
sure.
Mass famine, and they don't want that again, and they all know that, and they're all literally walking around in the streets of Southern Sudan, and even in Northern Sudan and Darfur, they're all walking around these places saying, this can't happen again. We can't let this happen again. So, you know, as friends of all the Sudanese people, I think, and people in that region, we need to be looking for the answers and helping them.
And as a matter of fact, Ambassador Samantha Powers, who just visited, I believe it was Central African Republic, just on Thursday, made that very comment about, you know, every time we see a genocide, we say never again. We can't let this happen again, and yet somehow it happens again. Dr. Sanders, let me come back to you. There's so many other conflicts to talk about. Of course, there is CAR, C-A-R, Mali, as well as the Democratic Republic of Congo, and particularly in the case of Mali and the DRC. The French have taken a lead in stepping in to try to bring stability. Are these conflicts appropriate for the U.S. to become more involved, and in what way would that be, do you think? Or should it be, I should ask?
Well, I think that we've always played a political role in trying to find solutions to some of these very difficult problems. Even in Mali, we were very supportive, and I think we are, you know, extremely supportive in trying to find a political solution to what's going on in the Central African Republic. And I think that what disturbs me, I guess, troubles me the most is the increase in sectarian violent conflict in sub-Saharan Africa that we hadn't really seen over the last 10 years before. You see it now in northern Mali, we're seeing it in northern Nigeria, and certainly in Central African Republic, which has been a predominantly Christian country, and you have, for the first time, an interim Muslim leader. And what you see now with the conflicts that are going in CAR is it's becoming more and more of a sectarian issue than it has ever been, and CAR has been unstable for many years, and they've had challenges for many years, but this sectarian dimension to the conflict in CAR is very troubling. And I think that countries like the U.S. and the French and others, the European Union, of course, really trying to do their best so that this doesn't escalate, and finding a way to get the parties to look at the political solutions. I want to go back to South Sudan for a moment.
If you can do that very briefly for me.
So I don't want to leave out the economic issue. I understand the political framework that's there, I understand the political challenges, but I would not underestimate the natural resource issue of oil being part of the what's driving the conflict between the Nuer and the Dinka at this time.
Indeed, and just like the entire continent, is a very large issue and very complicated. We're unfortunately going to have to stop the discussion here. But Ambassador Robin Renee Sanders, thank you so much for your time and expertise. And Matt Kohn, thank you for coming in. We do appreciate it.
Thank you.
We'll talk to you again another time. And you are watching Arise America.